crystal, crank, glass, and ice. These are not just a few street names for methamphetamine, they are actually a destructive force that has torn through countless American communities. Behind every gram sold and every hit taken, there's a story of profit and peril. Those who know the truth know that behind each of these is one big name: Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera, more commonly known as El Chapo. From the sun-drenched hills of Sinaloa to the crowded streets of American cities, El Chapo's name echoes, sending ripples of fear among people. But how did he manage to stretch his empire like that? How did he go from a fun-loving practical joker to become the most feared drug lord in the world? So much so that a mere letter from El Chapo has sparked fear among the authorities of the highly secure Colorado prison. Let's uncover his life history, moving from the streets of Mexico to the prisons of America and his escape plans. Early life. Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera, or more commonly El Chapo, is a name synonymous with drug lord. He was a former leader of an international crime syndicate and was known as one of the most powerful drug traffickers in the world. But what turned him into a criminal and a drug trafficker? This question takes us back to the rugged hills of Sinaloa, Mexico, where El Chapo was born on the 4th of April 1957 into a world of poverty and limited opportunities. If being poor was not enough, he endured physical abuse at the hands of his father, and it was also due to him that El Chapo was introduced to drug dealing. His father was known to be a cattle rancher, like most other people of that area. Some other sources mention him to be an opium poppy farmer. Talking about his family, he has 2 younger sisters and 4 younger brothers, which makes him the eldest among 7 siblings. Some reports also mention his 3 older brothers, who are believed to have died of natural causes when El Chapo was young. El Chapo remained functionally illiterate, the reason being expensive education that was more of a luxury he couldn't afford. For reference, the closest educational institute was about 100 kilometers from his home. Despite the weight of his circumstances, he turned out to be pretty youthful, a practical joker. El Chapo used to play pranks on his friends and family when he was young. Maybe that's where he found solace in. Amidst all this, there is a darker reality. Guzman's childhood was filled with the horror of getting abused by his father, and to seek refuge from this brutality, he used to run to his maternal grandmother. What's more saddening is that he used to stand against his father's wrath to shield his younger siblings too. El Chapo's turning to opium cultivation was natural, as there were far fewer opportunities in his town for employment. All that was left was hiking to the hills of Badiraguato to harvest the bud of poppy. As soon as the plants would get stacked, his father would sell it to some other suppliers. And about the profit, El Chapo's father would spend most of it on women and liquor. This would leave him empty-handed by the end. Sick of this situation, El Chapo decided to take things into his own hands. So he started cultivating marijuana on his own, starting at the young age of 15, along with his cousins. This marijuana production proved favorable as he started supporting his family with the money he earned by selling that marijuana. But that didn't change his father's behavior towards him. He kept up with the physical abuse, ultimately kicking El Chapo out of the house during his late teenage. This took El Chapo to his grandfather's, and that's also when he was named El Chapo, a Mexican word for shorty. This is an obvious reflection of his short, stocky physique. Anyhow, El Chapo knew that he could not make anything out of his life by living in his hometown. So he left. His uncle, who was among the pioneer drug traffickers in Mexico, helped him get away. And that's when El Chapo got into organized crime. With this, the world saw the turning of a poor, illiterate child into the biggest drug trafficker in the world, beginning of his criminal career. It all began when El Chapo started helping his father in growing marijuana for local dealers. Hence, he grew up witnessing the allure of drug trafficking. Soon enough, in the late 1970s, El Chapo became associated with Hector Luis Palma Salazar, a rising drug trafficker of that time. He assisted him religiously in mapping out routes to transfer drugs into the US. He was responsible for overseeing all the shipments and drugs movement. And that's not all. He later became associated with the Guadalajara cartel as well, headed by Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo in the late 1980s. He worked as a chauffeur for Felix and used to manage drug shipments from Colombia to Mexico, managing all the routes, land, air, and sea. The experience definitely shaped El Chapo's understanding of the intricacies of the drug trade, expanding his network of connections within the criminal underworld. Things took a turn and Felix got arrested in the 1880s, which fueled El Chapo to make his boldest move in the early 1990s. He established his own cartel. However, the establishment of the cartel was thoroughly based on the recommendation of drug lord Felix. At this point, the territory of Mexico was divided into two parts and was handed over to two cartels. El Chapo got the area that was around Sinaloa and the Pacific coast. The specific regions that he got were the drug corridors of several areas, among which were the two border crossings that connect the states of Sonora and Baja California with the U.S. states of California and Arizona. El Chapo has never been too easy to work with. He knew how to approach the smugglers. He mostly stayed violent and serious, killing smugglers over things as petty as late shipment arrival. Everyone in this business knew they couldn't cheat El Chapo if they wanted to live. According to reports, Guzman was living in the border city of Agua Prieta, Sonora, from where he would supervise all the drug trafficking activities. Having his hands in so many drug activities, he managed to purchase a lot of properties registered under false names. These places served as stash houses for drugs, weapons, and cash. But things didn't work in his favor for very long. The U.S. authorities finally detected El Chapo in 1987. An indictment was issued against him that mentioned how El Chapo had coordinated the shipment of around 4,700 kilograms of cocaine and about 2,000 kilograms of marijuana. Later, another indictment alleged that El Chapo trafficked an unspecified amount of marijuana and about 32,000 kilograms of cocaine in just 3 years. El Chapo didn't just continue implementing the techniques he learned during all this time. He discovered a lot more on his own. He would hide drugs in chili pepper cans and sometimes in fire extinguishers. He would build air-conditioned tunnels under the Mexico-US border to move the drugs. He expanded his criminal career so much that he became the biggest smuggler of various kinds of illicit drugs, including cocaine, heroin, marijuana, and most importantly, methamphetamine. El Chapo didn't believe in staying stuck in Mexico. He expanded his empire beyond Mexico's borders. But how did he do that? Well, expansion of El Chapo's empire beyond Mexico. As evident from his early life history, El Chapo has always been into drugs and smuggling. It was more of a reflection of his surroundings, father, cousins, and uncles who assisted him. From the early days, one thing was for sure. El Chapo didn't want to stay confined to Mexico. He always saw the potential for bigger profits and greater power by tapping into international markets. And what other country would offer a better opportunity than the United States? The country confines a sea of people, mostly unattended youth, with the craze for drugs. But all along, El Chapo also knew entering into the international market was not as simple as crossing a border with a backpack full of drugs. It required strategy, connections, and a whole lot of cunning. He was fearless in making deals with his rival groups if it meant expanding his reach. El Chapo knew where the demand was the highest, and he made sure his product was there to meet it. So he stretched his empire all the way from the streets of Los Angeles to the ports of Europe, with distribution hubs in cities like Chicago, New York, and Madrid. He established his presence in key locations around the world. Of course, none of this would have been possible without a steady supply of drugs. Hence, El Chapo had connections with drug producers in Colombia and some other South American countries. All in all, El Chapo had control over every step of the supply chain, be it production or distribution. However, the most interesting aspect of his expansion was his ability to evade main control by evading law enforcement. I mean, you have to have some skills up your sleeves to be a drug lord. Despite facing several arrests, he continued to remain one step ahead. He used bribery, violence, intimidation, and whatnot to protect his interests. He ensured his empire continued to thrive, no matter the circumstances. Considering the breadth of El Chapo's criminal activities, what criminal records do you think he holds? Why not have an overview of his criminal activities? Clearly, El Chapo wasn't just a run-of-the-mill criminal, he was a mastermind. His exploits stretched far beyond the borders of Mexico, leaving a trail of chaos and intrigue in his wake. He didn't just dabble a bit of marijuana and cocaine. El Chapo was a kingpin who controlled vast quantities of narcotics. El Chapo's criminal activities didn't stop at drug trafficking. He was involved in a myriad of other illicit activities. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty in pursuit of profit. Reports suggest that he was involved in the lucrative trade of narcotics, including cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine, sourced from South America and distributed across the United States. As he said, "I supply more heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana than anyone else in the world." Not just that, he was also engaged in money laundering schemes, funneling dirty money through legitimate businesses. El Chapo was even involved in human smuggling, where he would transport people across the border for a hefty fee. Violation was the foundation of his career, and he wasn't shy of using violence and intimidation to enforce his will and silence informants. Throughout his life, he tried his best to infiltrate law enforcement agencies and government institutions through bribery and corruption. Though El Chapo's involvement in drug trafficking is notorious, it's not just him. Various members of his family, including his sons, nephews, and brother, were also deeply involved in the drug trade. But as we know, drug trafficking always comes with a price. El Chapo and his family did pay, too. His numerous family members, including his sons and nephews, were targeted by rival cartels, resulting in assassinations and kidnappings. Even his marital life got intertwined with his criminal activities, having his wives and children become entangled in his illicit enterprises. After El Chapo's arrest and imprisonment, his sons and associates continued his legacy by undertaking the leadership of the Sinaloa Cartel. It remained a dominant force in the drug trade, but what sets it apart? How did the Sinaloa Cartel continue to thrive and maintain its control? It's certainly the mastermind, tactics employed by El Chapo to maintain control. There's no doubt that El Chapo's criminal records and his story of arrest and escapes would send shivers down anyone's spine. He was obviously not just dealing with drugs, he was orchestrating a full-blown criminal syndicate. But how did he do that? Let's break it down. First off, his go-to tool was fear, which he built up after years and years of work. He wouldn't spare anyone who dared to cross him. El Chapo was very clear in his dealings with rivals. He set a clear tone: step out of line, and you will regret it. I mean, with such a strong criminal record, who wouldn't be scared when El Chapo's name comes up? Then there's the corruption angle. He was able to expand his empire due to his network. He had a tight grip on law enforcement and government officials. You scratch his back, he scratches yours, with bundles of cash, of course. He knew the art of bribery and wonders it could do to keep authorities off his back. El Chapo truly made the most out of it. Now, let's talk tunnels. He is called the Tunnel Man for a reason. He would dig his way to fortune under the US-Mexico border. Mind you, these weren't your average dirt tunnels. We are talking about high-tech passageways with ventilation, lights, and that sort of work. You would find it something out of a movie, except it was all real. And El Chapo was the mastermind. Oh, and let's not forget about the alliances, for he was the king of making deals. El Chapo wasn't afraid to team up with his rival cartels. After all, he saw strength in numbers. Plus, it made anyone thinking of challenging him think twice. Who would ever want to take on a united front of ruthless drug lords? There it is, El Chapo's playbook for running the biggest drug empire in history. But drug trafficking is never a bed of roses. There are arrests and escapes too. And for El Chapo, it was arrest after arrest and escape after escape. First arrest. Let's rewind the clock to 1993, when a cardinal was shot and killed. Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari immediately condemned the murder, but did not link it to organized crime. The elusive drug kingpin El Chapo set out on a dangerous journey to avoid arrest after sensing the tightening grasp of law authorities. He took solace in the privacy of a hotel room while strategizing his next move from the quiet streets of Tonalá, Jalisco, to the busy center of Mexico City. El Chapo planned the handover of power inside his empire over those 10 days of secret meetings, leaving his closest associates to face the difficult responsibility of running the show while he was away. Equipped with a fabricated persona and an unwavering determination, he set off on a dangerous journey across Chiapas and into Guatemala, surrounded by his devoted group and his unwavering partner, his girlfriend. However, even in the most isolated areas of Guatemala, El Chapo's whereabouts were discovered by the long arm of the law. Tragically, a dependable military officer exposed his hidden shelter to the police after bowing to the temptation of bribery. The arrest that followed took place close to the border between Mexico and Guatemala and signaled the beginning of a cat-and-mouse game between El Chapo and the authorities that would attract the world for many years to come. First, escape, and second, arrest. Fast forward to 2001, while he was incarcerated in Mexico prison, the United States was charging him with money laundering and smuggling tons of cocaine into California. What does a cunning operator such as himself do when the walls begin to close in? After escaping scrutiny, he is said to have escaped prison by hiding in a laundry cart. El Chapo's image as a master of escape was cemented, and investigators were left scratching their heads at a sight straight out of a Hollywood movie. And after hiding out in the Sierra Madre Mountains for a while, El Chapo began making trips to places such as Culiacan and Mazatlan. 7 days before he was arrested, he even went to a family gathering in Sinaloa. Can you imagine that just days before his capture, he's casually mingling at the family gathering? The audacity. On February 22, 2014, he was captured by Mexican officials at a Mazatlan hotel. Before his detention, they had been robbing homes that belonged to his partners. Early in the morning on that day, more than 65 Marines stormed the hotel where El Chapo was staying as part of the capture operation. Without using a gun, he was caught after being discovered in bed with his spouse. After being captured on camera, he was transferred to Mexico City so that his identity could be confirmed. Afterward, he was sent to a maximum security facility where there was more constant monitoring inside and outside the building. But is it really possible to lock down such a mastermind as El Chapo, or will he ultimately escape the law again? Second escape and third arrest. Can you believe it? In July 2015, El Chapo managed to disappear once again. But how did he execute such a risk-taking escape this time? He was last seen by security cameras at 8:52 p.m., close to the shower area of his cell. But when guards checked on him after noticing he hadn't been seen for around 25 minutes, that's when they discovered that he had disappeared. It appeared that he had secretly entered a tunnel connecting the bathing area to a nearby construction site more than a mile away. This tunnel was not your typical hole in the earth. It was almost 5 feet tall, 33 feet deep, and fitted with air vents, lighting, and excellent workmanship. But how did he manage to build such a masterpiece without anyone noticing? Even more shocking, they discovered a motorcycle inside, which raises the possibility that El Chapo utilized it to get away. Moving forward to 2016, after receiving reports of suspicious behavior at a property, the authorities in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, placed it under observation for a month. They received messages through intercepts indicating they anticipated a high-profile target. On January 8, 2016, El Chapo and a lieutenant made their getaway through a covert tunnel during a raid spearheaded by 17 Marines, and they later stole a car. El Chapo attempted to bribe the police after they were apprehended. He threatened them when they refused. Out of concern for a cartel attack, the cops arrested him. He was then transported by air to Mexico City and put back in the maximum security facility from where he had escaped. 5 shooters were slain, 6 were taken into custody, and 1 Marine was injured during the operation. Weapons, including grenade launchers and sniper rifles, were taken by the authorities. Can you imagine the scene when El Chapo was returned to Mexico City via plane? And what must have gone through his mind when he found himself back in the same maximum security jail from which he had escaped? El Chapo's extradition to the United States. After being captured a second time in January 2016, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was facing extradition to the U.S. His attorneys made many attempts to halt it. In October 2016, a judge who was engaged in his case was murdered. Guzman was charged with drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder in a number of U.S. cities. The United States pledged not to request the death sentence in exchange for extradition. Guzman was extradited to the U.S. in January 2017 to stand trial. He entered a not guilty plea and was sent to a New York high-security prison. Given his violent past, he was subject to extra security before his trial began in November 2018. In February 2019, he was convicted and given a life sentence. Do you think Guzman's guilty verdict and life sentence were fair? Sentencing and imprisonment in a high-security facility in Colorado. After being found guilty of multiple charges in February 2019, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman received a life sentence with an additional 30 years of imprisonment in July 2019. Moreover, he was compelled to surrender almost $12.6 billion. Following that, he was moved to ADX Florence, a Supermax prison in Colorado. ADX Florence is a very secure prison located approximately 115 miles south of Denver. Since its establishment in 1994, the prison Supermax has never had an escape and is intended to house the most dangerous offenders. In Supermax, Guzman spends most of his time in a solitary cell with little to no interaction with the outside world. Much like other prisoners, he has restricted access to things like religious services and educational programming through a TV in his cell. Strict security protocols are in place within the jail to stop prisoners from influencing the outside world or posing a threat. Head counts are regularly performed, and prisoners are constantly supervised. Guzman's severe conditions were condemned by Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who described them as inhumane. Do you think the security measures in ADX Florence are necessary to keep dangerous criminals like Guzman contained? El Chapo's recent prison escape plan. El Chapo's recent letter to a U.S. judge sparked serious discussion. In this letter, he complained that prison officials are preventing him from receiving legal materials from his attorneys. He claims that he is being treated unfairly and attributes this to worries about his previous prison breaks in Mexico. It seems El Chapo is on a mission to find a legal loophole that might allow him to be released, but jail authorities have not reacted to his complaints. What legal loophole do you think Guzman could be trying to exploit to secure his release? What's going on behind those Supermax walls? Is that just a letter or another escape plan, as the authorities suggest? Do you think there is more to the story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more juicy updates.